Welcome to the Leadership Lounge, a place to kick back and listen as our experts dissect some of the biggest questions leaders face today. I'm Emma Coombe, Leadership Advisor in our London office. In today's episode, we're talking about what top-performing teams have in common. How well your top team performs can make or break your organisation. It's critical you get it right, with everyone pulling in the same direction towards your strategic goals. But given that market conditions are in constant flux and C-suites are shouldering more responsibility than ever before, getting the balance right in your top team is far from easy. So what are some of the key characteristics of a high-performing leadership team? How do top-performing leadership teams foster a culture of collaboration and trust? And how do you go about having uncomfortable conversations with your team? But before we dive in, we'd like to remind our listeners that you can find all episodes of Leadership Lounge and Redefiners on YouTube. If you're watching this video, hit the subscribe button below. Also, don't forget to share any burning questions you want our experts to answer by emailing redefiners@russellreynolds.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Let's jump right in and speak to our experts on this topic. First up, we'd like to welcome Nick Anderson, Leadership Advisor from Russell Reynolds Associates Hong Kong office. He has almost 2 decades of experience in assessing and developing C-suite leaders, so we can't wait to hear his perspective on this topic. Nick, welcome to the lounge.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Nick, a recent Bain & Company study found a meaningful correlation between highly effective top teams and whether companies beat their competition in revenue growth, profitability, and total shareholder return. What do you think the secret is to a top-performing team?
I always think you can break it down into a rough formula, which is that, say, 60% of team performance is going to come from having the right people in those roles. So you've got the right capabilities on the team. 30% is going to come from kind of structural factors. So are you aligned on your purpose, your vision, your mission, your goals? Do you have a team that's moving in the same direction for the same reasons and higher reasons, because that builds that sense of resilience? And then probably 10% comes from the little bit of magic, the magic dust, which is the team dynamics.
I love the idea of the magic dust, Nick. I'm sure it's elusive, but when you get it right, it can have a powerful impact. And I also think your point about having the right people in the right place is critical. Finding the right people quickly will in turn bring stability to your team. And I often find that the CEOs who take longer to build their team find it difficult to establish the right team dynamics. I'd like to delve a little deeper now into how CEOs can transform their executive team from good to great. To talk on this point, I'd like to bring Emmy Melville, Leadership Advisor from Russell Reynolds Associates Atlanta office, into the conversation. Emmy, welcome to the Leadership Lounge.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Emmy, in your role at Russell Reynolds, you work with leaders on improving their self-awareness and rethinking the way that they interact with their team. In your work with top-performing leadership teams, what are some of the key characteristics that they have in common?
The first one that comes to mind is definitely trust. And it's absolutely foundational for high-performing leadership teams, the ability to trust one another. You know, they're under immense stress, uncertainty, high-stakes transformations. And with trust and with those trusting relationships, they can really start to collaborate more effectively, share information, support one another, and make tough trade-offs and tough decisions. And then another key characteristic that comes to mind is accountability or ownership. At its core, I think this is doing what you say you'll do. And trust and accountability absolutely go hand in hand. It's hard to have one without the other.
I think that trust is incredibly undervalued in today's leadership teams, Emmy, and yet so pivotal to the long-term success of an organisation. For me, part of the reason that we have such an erosion of trust today in some of the biggest businesses is the very rapid turnover at the most senior level. CEOs, CFOs, their tenure is becoming increasingly short. And it's, in my mind, very hard, therefore, for the people who are reporting into them to have enough stability to really understand what they're asking teams to do, what their purpose, their values are. So, Emmy, if I turn back to you now, how do top-performing leadership teams foster a culture of collaboration and trust?
Trust erodes much faster than it builds, right? And trust can look so different and feel so different for each person on the team. So a lack of trust is really not a problem that only the CEO or the team leader can solve. Each person on the team has to come to the table ready to look at themselves, how their behaviors contribute to building or eroding trust across the team. I have a client, he's a CEO, a brilliant guy. And as we were having a conversation about doing an exercise with his team focused around building a little more trust, and I asked this of all team leaders in advance, I asked him, how ready are you to change or evolve, to really challenge your thinking about this team and about yourself? And he said, I'm 100% ready for everyone else to change. And of course, we laughed. He was joking, but I think it's not that uncommon that we gather an executive team and many people walk into a conversation with the mindset of, if this person could do this different, or if we could only change this about X, then everything would be great on this team. And so what we challenge, or what I like to challenge leaders to do, is really start with self first. And of course, model and champion those high trust behaviors that you want present on your team.
So I think this is a really key topic. It's hard having the humility, the vulnerability to come into a room with other leaders aware above all of your own strengths and areas for development. I've done this myself. We use psychometric assessment tools and the results are really fascinating. It tells you about how others perceive your behavior. And I score high, for example, on prudence and diligence, which suggests that I could be somebody who's overly detail oriented, a tendency to micromanage, and this could really hold me back and limit the ability of the team to make decisions without perfect data. So I need to be aware of that. I also score high on tradition, which means that I'm not likely somebody who's going to think about how to really disrupt things or reinvent the world. But I need to make sure that I welcome that kind of quality in others, because together it's very effective. It'd be interesting to know from a listener perspective, how many C-suite leaders enter these kinds of conversations aware of what they need to change about themselves, as opposed to what others can do to change. We'd love to hear from you on this point. So do get in touch by emailing redefiners@russellreynolds.com with your thoughts or comments. Earlier on in this episode, we touched on the fact that accountability and ownership of organisational performance is a quality found in high-performing leadership teams. One way to improve accountability is to find leaders who are T-shaped. Nick, can you explain in a little more depth about what T-shaped leaders are and why they're considered key to the success of an executive leadership team?
So a T-shaped leader is obviously what it suggests. You're looking for someone with depth, real expertise, but you're also looking for breadth. So leaders who deploy across an organisation. So for me, the breadth piece is leaders who show up in a certain way, who share expertise, who share knowledge across the organisation, across teams, but they also keep laser-like focus on driving the performance of their own teams and ensuring that they're always sort of optimizing what they bring to the organization and continually sort of maximizing their own skill sets and impact.
I really like the analogy, as it's so easy to visualize, with the vertical line showing the deep functional expertise and the horizontal line showing the enterprise-wide mindset. And we know from the work we do at Russell Reynolds that having T-shaped leaders means that the C-suite aren't focused on fighting for resources for their individual functions, but they can instead work to solve enterprise-wide issues, such as sustainability and tech. A top team has to be agile, has to be able to respond quickly. And if individuals are very narrow, thinking only about their area, their part of the business, that will come at the cost of the whole organization continually evolving and adapting. But it's important to recognize that for leaders who are used to working in a narrow functional role, it's a big transition to move to enterprise-wide thinking. So we spend a lot of time at Russell Reynolds thinking about how executives can surround themselves with the right kind of transition support, whether it's coaching or mentoring, to help them make that shift and manage the trade-offs with their time and energy. We'd now like to introduce another one of our leadership advisors, Miriam Capelli, who's based in Russell Reynolds Associates Singapore office, into the conversation. Miriam, welcome to the Leadership Lounge.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Miriam, you're well versed in advising leaders on how to come together as a high-performing team. What type of actions do CEOs need to model for their top team?
Well, first and foremost, I think the CEO really sets the tone at the top. So role modeling, firstly, self-awareness and authenticity is critical. I think they need to then showcase their ability to really be authentic and open by listening to truly understand their team. And that's listening to their perspectives, their feedback, without the judgment that often comes with that dynamic between very smart, capable people. No CEO is perfect. No C-suite team member is perfect. And I think if you can really embrace your imperfections as a team, be open, transparent, and realize that actually together you're mutually very strong and can fill the gaps that you might have individually.
That openness and willingness to lay bare any imperfections is part of being a great leader. It's a sign of strength rather than of weakness. And it allows others to also articulate where they feel they might need to be supported. Miriam, we know it's not easy ensuring that your top team is consistently high performing. What do you think are some of the common misconceptions holding CEOs back?
Interesting question. I think predominantly what I've seen is this idea that everybody needs to work in perfect harmony. And when you think about great C-suite teams, they're incredibly diverse. We want diversity of perspective, thinking style, gender background. It's very natural that when you have a diverse group of very smart people coming together, that there'll be tension. And I think what we need to support C-suite leaders in doing is really understanding how to best pull together as a team. Cohesion doesn't always mean harmony. Cohesion often means that you're willing to debate and disagree in the room, but present as a unified team outside the room. We need to manage that balance between having difficult conversations, but also being supportive and collaborative with each other. So I think the best C-suite teams are those who can navigate that really productively. So there's good productive tension. They're able to span opposing goals, but work together for a solution that's actually best for the enterprise. The other thing I think we often fall over on is that C-suite leaders think that the focus of their time should really be on how are we managing performance today. It's a very present focus. And I think one of the critical roles of a CEO, and increasingly so, is it's more than just having the right team in place now. There's a huge responsibility to think about what the C-suite of the future will look like. And that really requires a lot of thinking and planning around succession and identifying that next generation of C-suite leaders.
That's right, Miriam. Effective top teams don't shy away from tension. Debate and having different points of view are, of course, part of the job, but so are support and collaboration. And the difference in our experience is that high caliber C-suites know how to productively navigate interpersonal friction. They know when to pull away and when to knit together. But this isn't easy to achieve, especially when your executives have different ways of approaching conflict and resolution and have differing levels of resilience. As we just mentioned, addressing issues in a top team or any team can be incredibly uncomfortable. Coming back to you, Emmy, what's your advice for leaders navigating this? How do you go about having uncomfortable conversations with a team?
First, let's just acknowledge that these types of conversations should feel tough, right? And so the advice I would give is just don't give yourself any excuses. I've worked with executive teams who've been together for over 15 years and some who have 15 days under their belt in terms of being an intact team. So when working with top teams, we like to use psychometric data. This can really aid in those potentially challenging initial conversations. It helps the team to build the habits around surfacing important topics. So it, again, provides that safe container. It means that we can talk about challenging topics in a different way, in a way that isn't accusatory, but rather is very strengths-based.
Many top teams believe that their primary purpose is to tackle critical business issues and solve problems that only they can solve. And while this is of course important, C-suite teams must also invest time into how they work together as a team, to understand the motives and pressures that drive the team they work most closely with. So, our time in the lounge today has come to an end. In 30 seconds, this is what we've learned. Trust and accountability are two key traits that can help transform your executive teams from good to great. Choose leaders who are T-shaped. They will be confident sharing knowledge and expertise across the enterprise, while still having a laser focus on the performance of their function. As a CEO or a C-suite leader, know your strengths and be prepared to work on your potential derailers. Start with yourself first, before looking at the rest of the team. Tension can be productive, as long as your team knows how to pull together when required. Thank you to all of our guests who joined me today. If you have any topics or burning questions you'd like us to cover in future episodes of Leadership Lounge, then please get in touch. Email your questions to redefiners@russellreynolds.com. You can find us on LinkedIn and follow us on X @RRA on Leadership. You can also find us on Instagram @Redefiners Podcast, and you can now subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, goodbye.